What if I told you that everything you believed about indigenous peoples' dwellings is untrue? It is commonly assumed that their settlements are simply clusters of primitive tents on a windswept plain, easily blown away by a strong gust of wind. Many people imagine these dwellings as temporary and unreliable shelters, built from whatever materials were at hand without much of a plan. In reality, the nomad's way of life was the result of centuries of observing the harsh natural environment and a deep understanding of physics. In reality, a Lakota camp was a highly complex engineering system capable of withstanding the harshest weather conditions. Each teepee in the camp was designed with aerodynamics in mind, allowing it to withstand the hurricane-force winds of the open prairies. The conical shape was no accident, as it provided ideal stability and allowed smoke to be effectively vented from the indoor hearth. The arrangement of the teepees relative to one another also followed strict rules of safety and social hierarchy. The entire camp was typically arranged in the shape of a huge circle, which served as the first line of defense against sudden attacks. In the center of this circle, there was always an open space for holding important tribal gatherings and sacred rituals. This circular layout allowed for the protection of livestock and children by creating a secure inner perimeter. Watch the video to the end, and you'll learn how the architecture of a nomadic settlement evolved into a perfect survival mechanism amidst the endless prairies. Are you ready for the shocking truth about how the shape of the dwelling saved people from devastating hurricanes? The design of the Lakota teepee was created with the constant and strong winds of the Great Plains in mind. A conventional rectangular structure would have borne the full force of the airflow and inevitably collapsed. The cone, however, caused the wind to flow smoothly around the structure on all sides. The lower part of the teepee was always secured to the ground with special wooden stakes. These were driven into the ground at a specific angle to create maximum tension in the leather covering. Thick hides were tightly stretched over the frame, forming a completely smooth surface without any folds. This smoothness prevented air turbulence from forming around the dwelling itself. The slope of the teepee's rear wall was steeper than that of the front. This shifted the structure's center of gravity closer to the base and increased overall stability. Wind hitting the gentler slope of the front simply pressed the tent against the ground. This geometry acted as a natural stabilizer during severe storms. The entrance was traditionally small and located slightly above ground level. The opening itself was closed by a thick leather flap stretched over special wooden struts. This flap could be securely fastened with straps, completely blocking airflow. When closed, the entrance blended into the main wall, maintaining the overall aerodynamics. Special wind flaps were located at the top of the structure. Two long poles allowed the position of these flaps to be adjusted depending on the wind direction. During strong gusts, they could be tightly closed or turned to face the wind. This prevented air from blowing inside through the smoke vent. The frame was not assembled haphazardly, but according to a strict pattern of pole interlacing. Three main supporting poles formed a sturdy tripod capable of withstanding enormous pressure. The remaining poles were placed in the forks formed by this tripod in a specific sequence. This load distribution made the entire system incredibly rigid and durable. The points where the poles crossed at the top were tied together with a long, sturdy strap. This strap not only secured the structure, but also ran down the inside of the teepee. The end of the strap was firmly attached to a sturdy peg driven into the very center of the earthen floor. This central anchor prevented the wind from tearing the dwelling from the ground. In regions with frequent tornadoes, the Lakota used additional securing methods. Heavy stones were placed around the base of the teepee, further pressing down on the lower edge of the covering. The ground around the tent was lightly compacted to create a solid embankment. This embankment diverted water and prevented the wind from blowing under the lower edge. The outer shell was sewn together from numerous pieces of treated leather using special sinew threads. When wet from rain, these threads swelled significantly and completely sealed the tiny needle holes. The leather sheet became a monolithic shield, impervious to even a drop of moisture or a single gust of wind. Such a shell surpassed many modern synthetic materials in its properties. Every detail of this structure was governed by the laws of physics and mechanics. Such engineering solutions were refined over centuries in harsh climatic conditions. It would be very interesting to hear your perspective on such architectural solutions. What do you think about the application of aerodynamics in such ancient structures? Please share your thoughts in the comments and be sure to subscribe to our channel. Guess what happened next when people learned to control airflows inside an enclosed space? The Lakota dwelling was essentially an aerodynamic tube with controlled draft. The fire in the center of the teepee required a constant supply of oxygen to maintain steady combustion. Without proper ventilation, the space would quickly fill with acrid and dangerous smoke. The solution to this problem lay in creating an artificial pressure differential. The air outside was significantly colder than the air near the hearth inside the teepee. The cold air sank downward and sought to enter the dwelling through the tiniest cracks. The heated air from the fire naturally rose upward toward the smoke vent. An inner leather lining called an ozone was used to regulate this flow. It encircled the inside of the teepee, creating a gap between itself and the outer shell. Fresh air entered under the outer edge of the dwelling and rose through this hidden corridor. It then emerged above the inner lining directly toward the hearth. This system ensured a constant supply of fresh oxygen to the flame. At the same time, the draft did not blow on the people sitting on the ground inside the tent. The cold air flowed behind their backs without disturbing the comfortable microclimate. This ingenious design allowed the fire to be kept burning even during the fiercest storms. Smoke from the hearth was drawn strictly upward by this rising current. It did not linger under the dome or descend back toward the people. The rate of smoke exhaust was regulated by those very same upper flaps. Proper adjustment of these components created ideal draft in any weather. During the warmer months, the lower part of the outer covering was slightly raised. This increased the airflow and created a pleasant coolness inside the dwelling. The inner lining remained in place, continuing to direct the air currents. The dwelling easily transformed from a warm winter home into a ventilated summer tent. The hearth itself was built in a small recess, strictly in the center of the floor. A ring of smooth stones was often laid around the fire to retain heat. These stones heated up and continued to give off heat even after the fire went out. This helped conserve precious firewood during long, cold nights. The upper part of the teepee always remained smoke-free. Various items were often hung there to dry in the warm, dry air. This space was used to dehydrate supplies of meat and plant-based food. The warm-up draft acted as a natural drying chamber. Controlling the draft required experience and constant monitoring of the wind direction outside. The person in charge of the hearth constantly adjusted the position of the upper poles with the valves. A single wrong move could destroy the delicate balance of air masses. In such cases, the room would instantly fill with thick carbon monoxide. In the next chapter, you'll learn an amazing secret about how they created a hidden layer of insulation. Thanks to this knowledge, the Lakota were able to live comfortably in extreme temperatures. How difficult do you think it was to maintain such a precise air balance without measuring instruments? The secret, passed down from generation to generation, was hidden right behind the backs of the people sitting by the fire. We're talking about a complex thermoregulation system built into the very structure of the teepee. The inner lining mentioned earlier served as a powerful insulator. It worked on the principle of a thermos, creating an air cushion between the outside world and the living space. Air is one of the best natural insulators when used correctly. The space between the outer covering and the inner wall excellently retained precious heat. The cold from the frozen outer skin simply did not reach the inner living space. This allowed the interior to remain above freezing even during the harshest frosts. The inner lining itself was sewn from carefully treated and softened pieces of leather. These panels were often decorated with intricate geometric patterns and pictograms depicting historical events. They were tightly fastened to the supporting poles of the frame with special leather straps. The height of this inner wall usually reached the height of an adult. The lower edge of the inner lining was pressed tightly against the ground along the entire perimeter. For greater air tightness, dry grass or soft moss was often placed underneath it. This completely blocked cold air from reaching the floor level where people slept. All cold drafts remained strictly within the buffer zone between the two layers. During particularly harsh winters, the empty space between the walls could be further filled with insulating material. Dry leaves, pine needles, or thick straw were packed in there to create a dense barrier. This layer virtually eliminated heat loss through the bottom of the tent. The dwelling turned into a reliable fortress, resistant to any sub-zero temperature. The upper part of the teepee remained single-layered to allow smoke to escape and ensure ventilation. The temperature there was always high due to the hot air rising from the fire. The main purpose of the insulation was to protect the lower, coldest living area. That was where people spent most of their time during the long winter blizzards. Additionally, thick layers of tanned hides were laid on the floor to retain heat. They created a soft, warm carpet that insulated people from the frozen ground. A thick layer of dry prairie grass could also be laid beneath this flooring. The floor became an extension of the dwelling's overall system for conserving thermal energy. During the warm season, this air pocket began to cool the interior. The outer layer, heated by the sun, transferred heat to the buffer zone, from which it was blown out by a draft. The inner screen remained cool, providing welcome shade and comfort. The thermoregulation system operated passively, requiring no additional effort. The lining also protected the living space from morning dew and condensation. Moisture forming on the inner side of the outer covering ran down the walls. It drained into the ground outside the inner screen, without getting on belongings. Inside the tent, it always remained perfectly dry, even during periods of prolonged rain. This double-wall technology was centuries ahead of modern concepts of energy-efficient construction. The engineering ingenuity of nomadic peoples created the perfect balance between mobility and protection. If you're impressed by the sophistication of this ancient insulation system, be sure to like this video. What the government doesn't want you to know is the ideal social and spatial organization of these settlements. A Lakota camp was never built haphazardly or randomly on the terrain, as it might appear to an outside observer. It always took the form of a strict and mathematically precise circle, possessing deep practical and structural significance. This shape was dictated both by the harsh laws of survival on the prairie and by the security needs of the entire large community. The circular layout was the ideal solution for protection against external threats and for maintaining internal order. The center of this enormous circle always remained completely free of any structures and served as the main square of the entire settlement. It was there that important community meetings were held, resources were fairly distributed, and decisions crucial to the entire group were made. Dwellings were arranged tightly along the circumference, forming a reliable and nearly continuous protective wall around the central zone. The entrance to this vast camp circle, called a hookah, always faced strictly east. This arrangement allowed every resident to feel part of a single, indivisible whole. The orientation of the main entrance to the east had not only symbolic but also purely practical significance for daily life. The first morning rays of the sun penetrated unimpeded through the gap in the circle and very quickly warmed the central area of the camp. In addition, the prevailing winds on the Great Plains most often blew from the west or north. A solid wall of tall tipis on the western side served as an excellent collective windbreak for the entire settlement. Thanks to this, a milder microclimate was always maintained inside the camp than on the open plain. Each individual dwelling within this perfect circle had its own strictly defined place according to the family's social status. Families were always arranged in strict accordance with their affiliation with specific kinship groups and military units. This created perfect order and completely eliminated any confusion during the rapid deployment of the camp to a new location. Even in complete darkness, a person could unerringly find the tent they needed simply by knowing its location within the circle. The system was so well established that every child knew their place in this complex structure from childhood. The distance between structures was always maintained in such a way as to minimize the risk of rapid fire spread. In the event of an accidental fire in one tent, intense flames could not easily spread to neighboring structures. At the same time, all the buildings stood close enough together to provide reliable collective protection from the biting wind. This delicate balance of distances had been perfected over many generations of life in the vast open spaces. The safety of each home was inextricably linked to the safety of the entire camp ring. The circular layout also ensured the fastest and most efficient exchange of important information among all residents. Any loud announcement from the very center could be heard perfectly in every farthest corner of the large settlement. In the event of sudden danger, an alarm signal instantly reached absolutely all inhabitants of the camp ring in a matter of seconds. Such natural acoustics were a vital function for the early warning system against approaching enemies. The nomadic city functioned as a single living organism, reacting instantly to any external stimuli. The outer ring of dwellings itself served as a natural and very reliable barrier against any uninvited guests from outside. The entire outer perimeter of the camp was constantly and vigilantly monitored by warriors on duty, watching the surrounding prairie. The complete absence of corners in the layout made the camp equally well protected from all possible directions of attack. It was practically impossible for either a person or a large predator to penetrate unnoticed into this dense and organized formation. This form of settlement gave people a sense of confidence and peace even in the most turbulent times. Within a single large circle, smaller circles consisting of several related families were often organized. They placed their dwellings even closer together, forming very compact and cozy residential blocks. Clear, narrow passages were always left between these blocks to allow for the convenient and rapid movement of people and resources. This complex fractal structure ensured maximum comfort and functionality of all available space. Each small circle was like a tiny fortress within a large and secure citadel. During very severe snowstorms, the circular shape of the camp created specific and extremely useful aerodynamics. Strong winds flowed smoothly around the entire camp along the outer perimeter, leaving the central area relatively calm and protected. Huge snowdrifts always accumulated only on the outside of the structures, creating an additional layer of natural insulation. Inside the ring, conditions remained suitable for carrying out necessary work and caring for the horses. The camp literally hid from the elements behind its own walls. In the next chapter, we'll explore the incredible physics of a simple wooden frame that reliably supports these high domes. This unique spatial organization united thousands of people into a single, incredibly well-coordinated survival mechanism. Do you think modern engineers could come up with a more efficient layout for a mobile nomadic city? Be sure to share your thoughts in the comments below this video. The wooden frame of the teepee was a surprisingly complex engineering system, based entirely on the principles of flexibility and strength. To build it, very long, thin, and perfectly straight tree trunks were typically used, most often mountain pine. These poles were carefully and painstakingly stripped of their bark and then dried in the open sun for many weeks. Proper pre-treatment prevented the wood from rotting and over time made it incredibly strong and light. Each pole was inspected by a master craftsman for hidden defects or cracks. The length of each individual pole could reach 7 or even 8 meters, depending on the desired size of the tent. At the same time, they always remained thin enough to retain the necessary natural flexibility under load. Logs that were too stiff and thick would simply snap in half under the onslaught of a powerful, hurricane-force step wind. The flexible poles, on the other hand, bent slightly under pressure, effectively absorbing gusts without any serious structural damage. The entire structure was designed to move with the wind, not against it. The foundation of the entire future structure was a very sturdy tripod made of the 3 thickest and straightest poles. They were securely tied together with a special rawhide knot at a height of about 5 meters above the ground. The tripod was always set up first and served as the main fixed anchor for all subsequent frame elements. Its shape predetermined the ideal angle of inclination for the future walls of this conical mobile home. The stability of the entire structure in severe weather depended on the correct installation of this base. After the base was successfully installed, all the remaining wooden posts were carefully placed in a circle into its upper forks. Their total number ranged from 15 to 25 for a standard family dwelling. Each post fit into its specific notch at the top, creating a perfect and even distribution of the entire weight. The entire main load from the heavy leather cover was evenly transferred to the 3 main supporting posts of the tripod. This system allowed the structure to stand for centuries without requiring any additional supports inside the room. A special connecting strap at the highest point of the pole intersection was wrapped very tightly around all the poles several times. This tight twist functioned as a powerful and flexible hinge, securely holding the separate parts together as a single unit. The harder the wind pressed against the tent's outer walls, the tighter and stronger this top knot became. The entire structure possessed a unique, self-tightening effect when external pressure increased significantly. This made the teepee one of the most stable portable dwellings ever created by humans. The lower ends of all the poles were always sharpened to ensure better grip on any type of ground. They were never dug deep into the ground, but merely rested lightly against it at a certain angle. The force of gravity and the weight of the heaviest leather cover held them securely in place. The complete absence of deep foundations allowed people to dismantle the frame very easily and quickly whenever they moved camp. Mobility was the top priority, so the structure was not supposed to have any unnecessary attachments to the ground. The surface of each individual pole was sanded by hand to a perfect smoothness so as not to accidentally damage the expensive leather covering. Any small splinter or rough spot could quickly wear through the covering due to the intense friction caused by gusts of wind. Preparing a truly high-quality set of poles required many days of painstaking and very hard manual labor. A good set of poles was highly valued and often passed down from generation to generation as a cherished family heirloom. High-quality wood ensured that the shelter would not collapse at the most critical moment. At the very top of the frame, the poles extended far beyond the connecting joint and crossed each other gracefully. These protruding ends of the poles created a distinctive, recognizable silhouette and served an important practical purpose for ventilation. They broke up strong air currents directly above the smoke vent, significantly improving the overall draft of the indoor hearth. They also served as a reliable support for attaching long leather straps from the external wind flaps. The smoke flaps allowed the airflow inside the dwelling to be regulated depending on the wind direction. During long, drawn-out rains, water could quickly run down the smooth surfaces of the poles protruding above the roof. To prevent moisture from accidentally entering the house through the top joint, experienced builders used small tricks. They tied a special leather shield or a bundle of dense, dry grass to the very spot where the poles intersected. This simple barrier effectively diverted all streams of water to the outer surface of the teepee's leather covering. Inside the house, it always remained dry and cozy, even during the heaviest tropical downpours. The entire complex wooden framework, once assembled, weighed several hundred kilograms and required exceptionally precise assembly. The slightest error in calculating the angle of inclination or the order of the pole's placement inevitably led to the entire structure becoming skewed. However, experienced female builders from the tribe could erect this complex geometric frame in just 20 minutes. The result of their work was an architectural form unmatched in its overall strength and stability. This frame was capable of withstanding not only the weight of the hide, but also the pressure of heavy wet snow in winter. What was found in the old archives overturns our ideas about the choice of settlement sites. The Lakota never set up their camps in random open areas of the prairie. The choice of a site was always the result of a careful analysis of the terrain and water resources. Water was a source of life, but it also harbored a great danger. Camps were traditionally set up in river valleys or near large streams. Trees growing along the riverbed served as a natural barrier against the fierce prairie winds. They provided the settlement with the necessary fuel for fires and materials for repairs. Dense thickets also concealed the camp from prying eyes on the open plain. However, setting up dwellings too close to the water was strictly forbidden. River levels on the prairies could rise catastrophically in just a few hours after rain. Sudden floods swept away everything in their path, turning the valley into a raging torrent. Therefore, the camp was always situated on an elevated terrace, out of reach of the rising waters. Scouts would study the marks left by past floods on the trunks of old trees. They determined the maximum possible water level based on mud marks and branches caught in the trees. The campsite was established strictly above this historical floodline. This strict safety rule was never broken, not even to save time. Proximity to the river guaranteed constant access to clean drinking water. People dug small wells in the sandy bank for natural filtration of the water. The water seeped through layers of sand and gravel, clearing itself of silt and debris. Such improvised sources provided crystal clear water for the entire large camp. The steep riverbanks were often used as elements of the settlement's passive defense. The river protected the camp circle from one or even several sides. Approaching the camp from the water's edge was extremely difficult for any enemy. This allowed guards to focus their attention on the more vulnerable sections of the perimeter. The valleys also had their own unique microclimate, distinct from the open prairie. In winter, temperatures there were often several degrees higher thanks to the protection of the hills. Snow did not cover the lowlands as heavily as it did on the flat plains. In summer, the proximity of water and the shade of trees provided the inhabitants with welcome coolness. The points where small streams flowed into larger rivers were considered ideal campsites. They offered an abundance of resources and convenient routes for quick movement along the riverbeds. The shoreline was often abundant with useful plants, roots, and medicinal herbs. Nature itself suggested the most favorable locations for a long-term stay. When leaving a settled area, the Lakota left behind as few traces of their stay as possible. They carefully cleared away trash and extinguished campfires so that nature could quickly recover. They regularly rotated their campsites along the river valleys, giving resources time to replenish. This ecological awareness allowed them to use the same territories for centuries. In the next chapter, you will learn how a complex system for storing supplies was organized inside these dwellings. Do you agree that choosing the right location was half the battle when it came to survival? The interior of the teepee required the strictest discipline in organizing storage. The limited space did not allow for items to be scattered haphazardly or left on the floor. Every item, from tools to provisions, had its own strictly designated place. This system ensured the preservation of resources and instant access to them in the dark. The primary storage containers were parflashes, sturdy containers made of rawhide. They were crafted by drying thick hides without the use of tanning agents. These cases were incredibly durable and completely waterproof. Their shape resembled flat rectangular envelopes, convenient for storage and transport. Parfleshi were usually placed along the inner wall of the dwelling behind the sleeping areas. They created an additional barrier against drafts and served as comfortable backrests for sitting. They held supplies of dried meat, roots, spare clothing, and valuable tools. Their rigid form protected the contents from mechanical damage during moves. Soft leather pouches of various sizes were used for small items. They were often hung on special wooden pegs stuck into the supporting poles of the frame. Placing items at a height protected them from the damp floor and small rodents. Suspended containers saved precious floor space for people and work. Weapons and the most valuable items were always placed at the rear of the teepee. This spot was considered the most honorable and safest, far from the entrance. Long objects were laid horizontally or tied to the frame for stability. In the event of a sudden alarm, a person could find their gear by touch. Food supplies were often stored in special hiding places behind the inner lining. The air pocket between the two layers of leather provided coolness and excellent ventilation. Dried food did not mold and retained its nutritional value for many months. Access to these hiding places was concealed from the prying eyes of outsiders. Wood fuel for the hearth was always gathered in advance and stored inside the tent. Dry logs were neatly stacked near the entrance on the left or right side. This ensured a supply of dry firewood even during prolonged heavy rains. The fuel served as a sort of internal partition, blocking some of the cold air from outside. Bulky items not needed on a daily basis could be secured outside high up on poles. They were tightly wrapped in moisture-resistant leather and tied to the back of the frame. At that height, they were out of reach of moisture, rot, and accidental damage. This external shelf significantly freed up space in the cramped interior living area of the teepee. Water was stored in special vessels made of waterproof natural materials. These were placed in a cool spot, away from the direct heat of the central hearth. The openings of the vessels were tightly sealed with wooden stoppers to protect against dust. Clean water was always on hand in case of thirst or the urgent need to extinguish a fire. This modular storage system turned the home into a functional survival warehouse. Packing all the parflashes took a minimum of time before the upcoming migration. Every family member knew exactly where their belongings were and was responsible for their safety. Order was not a whim, but a strict rule of life in the extreme conditions of the prairie. A Lakota camp never remained static throughout the calendar year. The architecture of the teepee allowed for flexible transformation depending on the season. The summer dwelling differed radically from the winter one in terms of protection and ventilation. This ability to adapt allowed the same structure to be used for decades. During the summer heat, the main task was to cool the interior. To do this, the lower edge of the outer covering was raised half a meter off the ground. A wide gap formed around the perimeter, through which a fresh breeze blew freely. Hot air escaped instantly through the enlarged upper smoke vent. In winter, the strategy shifted entirely to retaining as much accumulated heat as possible. The outer covering was firmly secured to the frozen ground with long, sturdy stakes. The gap between the ground and the edge of the hide was filled with a thick layer of snow or earth. This barrier blocked any drafts and served as additional insulation for the foundation. The winter configuration included the mandatory installation of an inner lining of ozone. As mentioned earlier, this screen created a powerful thermal insulation air pocket. During severe frosts, the space between the walls was additionally packed with insulating natural materials. The house turned into an airtight capsule capable of withstanding the harshest storms. The size of the dwelling itself could also vary depending on the season. In winter, they tried to use tents with a smaller diameter for more efficient heating. A smaller space required significantly less valuable firewood to maintain the temperature. In summer, however, they preferred spacious tents to comfortably accommodate the entire large family. The number of layers of clothing and bedding was strictly regulated by the season. The winter required the use of the thickest skins with dense, long fur. These skins were laid on the floor and used as incredibly warm blankets. In summer, light and thin coverings made of smooth tan suede were used. The location of the camp also underwent a strict seasonal rotation across the territory. Winter camps were set up in deep, wooded canyons, sheltered from the biting winds. The trees provided protection from blizzards and offered an inexhaustible supply of firewood. Summer camps were moved to open, elevated areas where a cool breeze blew constantly. The outer leather covering required constant care throughout the seasons. In summer, it was regularly cleaned of dust and soot to prevent the material from deteriorating. In winter, the inner surface was often fumigated with smoke for additional waterproofing of the pores. The smoke contained resins that impregnated the leather and made it virtually indestructible. During prolonged autumn rains, additional awnings were used over the entrance. They created a small covered porch for storing wet outerwear and firewood. Water ran down these awnings to the side without getting inside the warm room. People could come and go without bringing puddles of mud onto the dry central floor. The cyclical nature of these transformations was inextricably linked to the rhythms of nature itself. Knowledge of how to properly prepare the dwelling for the season was passed down as a vital science. Survival depended on the timely and correct reconfiguration of this mobile home. A mistake in the weather forecast could prove too costly in the harsh conditions of the prairie. The interior area of a teepee averaged about 20 square meters. On this small patch of land, it was necessary to accommodate space for sleeping, working, and cooking. Space optimization was a critically important aspect of daily comfort and survival. Every centimeter of space had its own strictly defined purpose and function. The central part was always occupied by the hearth, surrounded by a protective ring of smooth stones. This was a sacred zone. It was strictly forbidden to step over it or pass objects across it. The fire served as a source of heat and light and as a place for daily hot meal preparation. Enough free space was left around the hearth to allow people to move about safely. The spot opposite the entrance was considered the most honorable and was reserved for the host or important guests. Here were the most comfortable seats made of rolled-up hides and the best backrests made of willow twigs. This space was sheltered from drafts and warmed best by the fire. The most valuable family heirlooms and ceremonial objects were also kept here. To the right and left of the central hearth were the sleeping areas for the rest of the family. During the day, mattresses made of thick hides were neatly rolled up and pushed close to the walls. This freed up the central part of the tent for daily household chores. In the evening, the sleeping areas were rolled out again, transforming the work area into a cozy bedroom. The space near the entrance was usually used to store less valuable items and fuel. Here they kept a supply of firewood, water containers, and everyday work tools. This was the coolest part of the dwelling, where wet shoes were often left to dry. This zoning helped maintain order and cleanliness in the main living area. The round shape of the teepee imposed its own limitations on the placement of rectangular objects. Rigid parflashes were arranged along the curved wall, forming a multifaceted interior contour. This rounded the corners and made the interior as ergonomic and safe as possible in the dark. The interior's smooth lines harmonized with the overall conical shape of the building. All tools and utensils were designed with size and weight constraints in mind. Tableware was made of lightweight wood, leather, or horn so as not to take up much space. Bulky items that could not be folded or rolled up were simply not used in daily life. Compactness was the primary criterion in the manufacture of any household item. Cooking also required strict organization of the process within a limited space. Containers of boiling water were suspended on the sturdy wooden tripods directly above the hearth. This prevented pots from being accidentally knocked over and saved space on the floor itself. The cook's work area was always located on one side of the fire for convenience. During severe frosts, people tried to spend more time in bed under warm furs. All activity was kept to a minimum so as not to waste the body's precious energy. Belongings were placed within arm's reach so that one would not have to get up to retrieve them. The living space was limited to the radius of heat from the central warming fire. The rational use of space transformed the cramped tent into a quite comfortable home. This geometry of comfort was refined over many years of continuous nomadic practice. The ideal order allowed several people to live in such a small area without conflict. The limited space united the family into a single, harmoniously functioning mechanism. The primary requirement for Lakota architecture was the ability to relocate the camp instantly. The dwelling was essentially a giant construction set consisting of standardized modular components. The entire structure was assembled and disassembled without the use of nails, complex tools, or stationary scaffolding. The dismantling process took mere minutes and was performed almost entirely automatically. The leather cover, weighing over 50 kilograms, was the heaviest element. However, it was sewn in such a way that it could be folded into a compact, dense bundle. When properly rolled up, the cover took up minimal space and was ready for immediate transport. No other building material possessed such a combination of strength and flexibility. The wooden poles of the frame also served as a multifunctional logistical tool. When moving, they were tied together into special sleds on which all household belongings were loaded. The poles functioned as a means of transport, gliding across the thick prairie grass. Upon arrival at a new location, they once again became the supporting pillars for the teepee's walls. Standardized dimensions made it easy to replace broken parts or combine them. If one family lost part of the frame, neighbors could always lend spare wooden poles. The versatility of the elements ensured that any breakdown would not be critical to survival. All components of the tent were interchangeable within a single large camp. The process of assembling and dismantling the teepee was always supervised by the experienced women of the settlement. They knew the exact angle of each pole and the order for stretching the heavy leather canvas. Thanks to their coordinated work, the entire massive camp could be packed up in just an hour. Such mobility was vital for quickly moving to gather resources or fleeing from danger. The absence of a permanent foundation meant that the camp left no scars on the landscape. The land quickly recovered after hundreds of people moved on in another direction. This architecture was not a conquest of nature, but a harmonious integration into its changing cycles. Mobility allowed them to avoid depleting resources in any single specific area. Each module was designed to be carried by a single person or by draft animals. Bulky, monolithic structures simply had no place in this culture. Lightness and strength were achieved through the use of complex joints and a perfect balance of materials. Physics worked here to reduce mass without sacrificing structural reliability. In case of urgent need, the cover could be split into two halves. This was done to speed up the transport of heavy loads under extreme combat conditions. At the new location, the two parts were sewn back together or fastened with sturdy wooden pegs. This modularity provided incredible tactical flexibility during sudden emergency movements. As the wagons moved, the poles left long furrows in the soft earth. However, these tracks were quickly erased by wind and rain, concealing the direction of the entire tribe's movement. The nomadic city moved across the boundless plains like a great ship on the ocean. It appeared out of nowhere and just as seamlessly vanished into the endless prairie. Lakota architecture was a living organism, constantly in motion. It was a triumph of engineering, governed by the strict laws of survival and ergonomics. Their homes were not tied to a single spot. They moved along with their owners. This ideal mobility made this people the true masters of the Great Plains. In summary, we see that Lakota camps were true masterpieces of engineering. Every detail, from the angle of the poles to the inner leather screen, served a specific function. It was a flawless system of survival, created from natural materials and refined by centuries of practice. Their architecture proved that true reliability lies not in the weight of stone, but in flexibility and an understanding of the laws of physics. What other topics from the history of the Great Plains Indians would you like to see in future videos? Write your suggestions in the comments and be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new exciting investigations.